We're now joined by Henry Paulson, Treasury Secretary for George W. Bush. He was the administration's point person on the 2008 financial crisis and also led previous U.S. trade talks with China. It's great to have you here in studio. You know China's leadership very well, both from your time as Treasury Secretary and building out business for Goldman Sachs there for many, many years. How do you expect China to retaliate against the U.S. since these talks seem to have stalled?
Well, Margaret, let me begin by saying Happy Mother's Day and to my mom, Mariana, and my wife, Wendy. Now, I'm not going to predict how China is going to respond. They've been very restrained to date. They clearly want a deal and need a deal, as does the United States. No one wins a trade war. So I'm expecting, a fairly restrained response.
Well, you had one of the president's top economic advisors, Larry Kudlow, on air today saying that the Chinese came to talks this week and then backslid on some of the things they'd previously agreed to. Why the miscalculation?
Well, there's often miscalculations, right? People misunderstand China. They've got a different political system than ours, but they've got politics, they've got vested interests. But, the bigger picture here is this is a deal that's can be very good for the United States and very good for China. The Trump administration has been working very hard to do something which I think would make a big difference for American workers, for the American people, in terms of getting more balanced trade, in terms of protecting IPR, in terms of breaking down some big structural barriers to competition. And China's got plenty of problems themselves. They've got an inefficient financial system, inefficient state-owned enterprises, massive misallocations of capital. So their reformers know that if they're going to grow at an acceptable level, they need some structural changes. So this, I think, is been a missed opportunity for both countries. But I believe, and I think the overriding point here, the big picture is, if and when this deal is done, and I'm an optimist, I think it'll get done, the underlying tensions are still going to be there, because the stakes are much bigger than a trade war. The basic economic problem is still going to exist.
You've put up huge warning signs around this. You said you fear an economic Cold War, an economic iron wall.
Yeah, I talked about an economic iron curtain. And the reason I did is this, Margaret, that as I said, the stakes are much bigger than a trade war. This is a battle between two countries to set the standards for the technologies of the future, the technologies which are going to bolster economic growth and competitiveness around the world. And so the fundamental issue is technology. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's where the battleground is. And technology has blurred the lines between national security and economic competitiveness. And so, I think it's vitally important we protect our national security. But a growing and important part of trade is technology related. And so the real risk is that both countries, through their actions, will throw up or create an economic iron wall, which means we'll be decoupling global supply chains, right? We'll be having two systems with incompatible standards and rules. And so as I look at it, the defining strength of America is innovation. And we need to protect our technology, need to protect our innovation. Mm-hmm. But if we close ourselves off from other innovative economies and entrepreneurs, we jeopardize our leadership position in the world, and we're much less attractive as a destination for foreign investment.
So you seem to be saying the moment is ripe for this deal. Yes. You're optimistic, but you don't like tariffs. That's the president's main tool here. Is this going to damage the U.S. economy?
Well, so you're darn right. I don't like tariffs. Why don't I like them? Because they're a tax on the American consumer. But I see an even more perverse effect with tariffs. Those who do us the great honor of investing in America, of doing business with our companies and suppliers, do so because we've always had predictable, reliable economic policies. Tariffs jeopardize that. But now we see a situation where Republicans and Democrats and many international companies are applauding for tariffs if they're used to get concessions from China. And why is that? The reason is because we're in a tough spot in negotiations. Our tariffs are either non-existent or very low. So how do you put pressure on other countries to act? How do you put pressure on China? We don't have very many good tools. So that's why they prefer tariffs. Now,
is it going to hurt us economically?
But I'll say this. I would prefer the tactic of working with our allies to put pressure. But I got to admit that's an imperfect tool, right? Because our allies aren't very tough when it comes to negotiating with China. But will it hurt us? I tell you, if this persists too long, it will. Okay, there will be a cost to it. We're trying to accomplish something that's very important in terms of opening up the Chinese economy, but there's a cost. And as strong as our economy is right now, and it is very, very strong, as strong as it is, I'll tell you,
Mr. Secretary, we have to leave it there. I'm so sorry. We're running up against a hard break. We will be right back.